Begin to Gemara today on Daf Yudalet Amud Beis, about 12 lines up from the bottom of the Amud, where it says Amar Av Tivyoimi. The Gemara brought before a machlokes. The Gemara said that there's a machlokes whether you learn out a gzeira shava sacher, which is a gzeira shava, comparing a eved which is moicha atzmai, he sold himself, and an eved which is machru bezdin, the bezdin sold him. And that the Gemara said that we have here a brayse that clearly makes a few distinctions in the halachas between a moicha atzmai and machru bezdin, regarding whether he sold only till 6 years or more than 6 years, the halacha of ritzia, piercing the ear, that he stays till yovel, the halacha of hanoke, and the fact that his master can give him a shivcha kananis. So it seems like this brayse that brings a machlokes about this is arguing whether you learn this gzeira shava or not. So here the Gemara is going to continue and explain that all the halachas that the brayse brings, there are specific drashas of psukim that teach that we don't compare a moicha atzmai to machru bezdin. And it has nothing to do with whether you darshan the gzeira shava of sacher. Everybody agrees you darshan that gzeira shava maybe for other halachas, but over here these halachas there are psukim. Dr. Gemara. Amar Rav Tivyoimi Mishmeid Abaye. Rav Tivyoimi said in the name of Abaye, the Kula Alme, both opinions here in the brayse hold that Yalif sacher. You learn out the gzeira shava of sacher, comparing moicha atzmai to machru bezdin, and it relates to all the halachas. But v'hacha, the details that are brought in this brayse, b'hai kroka miflagi, they're arguing in the following psukim. So here the Gemara goes through one halacha at a time. My time the Tanakama. Why is the Tanakama saying the moicha atzmai nimka l'sheish v'yesal sheish? A person that sells himself as an eved, he sold for 6 years, and if he makes a condition, he could be sold even more than 6 years. The reason is because miyet rachmane gabi machru bezdin. In the pasuk where it says that it's only 6 years, and it writes it by a machru bezdin, so there that the Torah writes specifically that it excludes the case of moicha atzmai, because it says va'avadcha sheish shanim. So va'avadcha, he serves for 6 years. Zeh v'loy moicha atzmai. So that says only the one that's sold here by the bezdin. That's what that pasuk is talking about, and not someone that sells himself. The other mandam and the brayse here, which was Rabbi Eliezer, so he says that both the moicha atzmai and machru bezdin serve for 6 years only. Va'avadcha means something else. From there I learn l'cha v'loy l'yoyrish, that he serves only the master himself, but not a yoyrish. Rashi here explains when the Gemara says this drasha v'loy l'yoyrish, it doesn't mean a regular yoyrish, which is a son, because the Gemara will later say that a son that does yarshin this avid ivri. But it refers to a different type of Yiddish, let's say a daughter or a brother, which is not the Iker Yiddish. So over there we have this drasha to say that the Eved Ivri does not go to the Yiddish. The other opinion that already used up this pasuk, so from where does he know this drasha, that it doesn't go to the Yiddish? Avatcha achrin eksiv. It says in the Torah this expression of avatcha twice. So he learns out this drasha as well, not for the Yiddish. According to the other opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, so what does he do with the second time it says avatcha? Over there, in that pasuk, it's speaking about the master, that he should give hanoke, which is the gifts that he gives when he sends out his evet free. So the pasuk over there is saying that the master shouldn't feel bad about the fact that he has to give this hanoke, because avatcha, he worked for you sheishanim for 6 years, and he brought you brach into your house, so therefore you should give him this hanoke. So the context of the pasuk over there is talking about hanoke, and it's not used here for this drasha of v'loy Yiddish. Okay, so this is benegeh to 6 years. The next halacha, my time at the Tanakama da Omar. What's the source of the Tanakama's opinion that says moicha atzmai ein nirtza? The whole halacha of ritzia, that you pierce the ears, that's only by a machru bezdin, not moicha atzmai. Says the Gemara mit dem miyot rachmana gab machru bezdin, because the Torah specifically says a miyot in the pasuk where it says this, and it's speaking about machru bezdin. V'rotza adoinov es oznoi b'martzeya. So it doesn't say oizen, it says oznoi shaloi. Only the oizen, the ear of a machru bezdin. V'loi oznoi shel moicha atzmai, and that excludes the ear of the one that sold himself. The other opinion that does not hold of this exclusion and says that the din of ritzia applies by both. Ahilik gzeira shava dasa. That pasuk oznoi is written. It's extra pasuk taka, but it's for gzeira shava. The Tanya is related to Brayse. Rabbi Eliezer says, "Minayin l'ritzia she boizin yamanis." How do I know that the ritzia, the piercing of the ear, is done in the right ear? It doesn't say in the Torah which ear. So the answer is because we learn from this word here. Nemakan oizen. Here it says the extra word oizen, and it says oizen by the din of a mitzayre, when he brings the carbon and you have to put some of the blood on the ear. So it says over there, oizen mala alon yamin, just like over there, the Torah says it has to be the right ear, afkan yamin. So to here, the oizen is the right ear. And according to the other opinion, from where does you know this halach here of this gzeira shava? If you uses out this oznai for something else. Okay, the pasuk could have said, my oznoi. Why does it say the term oznoi? So here, some add in the Gemara, shma mino tarti. So he can learn out both. He can learn out the gzeira shava, and he learns out the halacha that it excludes also the oizen of the meichatzmai. According to the other opinion, why does the Torah write oznoi dafke? Ahomi bayalei oznoi v'lo yozno. It's coming to say that the whole halacha of Ritziyah only applies by an Eved Ivri, not by an Amma Ivriya. Amma Ivriya, there's no halacha of Ritziyah. According to the other opinion, from where does he know this halacha? That it excludes the Amma Ivriya. Nafkala, he learns it out from the lashon of the pasuk where it says v'im Amar Yaimar ha'eved. So it says the Eved. If the Eved says that he doesn't want to leave, he wants to stay with his master. So from here we see ha'eved v'lo yoma. That's only applying to an Eved and not to an Amma Ivriya. Ve'idach, according to the other opinion, what does he learn out from this Amma Yoma Eved? Mibayale, he learns from here another halacha. At sheyoymar keshahu Eved. The whole halacha that an Eved could stay past 6 years with the Ritziyah, that's only if he says this when he's still an Eved, a hafti, a sadaini, and so on. But once he's already free after the 6 years, too late. Then he can't anymore say that the halacha of Ritziyah doesn't apply. Ve'idach, according to the other opinion, from where do you see that it's only if he says so when he's still an Eved? May Eved ha Eved nafke. The pasuk could have said Amma Yomer Eved, and it said ha Eved. The extra hey teaches me this halacha as well. Ve'idach, the other opinion, Eved ha Eved leidarish. He doesn't dash in the extra hey. It's not extra. It's just the derech, the way the pasuk speaks. The third halacha, my time, the Tanakama, the Amma, Moicha Atzmai, Emanikanlai. Why did the Tanakama say that a Moicha Atzmai, when he leaves from his master, the din of Anoka, the gifts that a master has to give to the Eved, does not apply? Says the Gemara, Miet Rachmana, Gabi Machru Bezdin, because in the pasuk where it says it, by a Machru Bezdin, the Torah says a lashon that excludes a Moicha Atzmai. So the pasuk says, Hanik Tanik Loi. The one that Bezdin sells, so the master should give him Anoka. That means loy v'loy l'meichatzmai. So it excludes a meichatzmai. Ve'idach, the other opinion that says, Rabbi Eliezer that says that even a meichatzmai gets Anoka. Ahomi bayalei, he learns from here, loy v'loy l'yarshav. That the Anoka goes to him, and if this person that the master freed him, and he died before the master had a chance to give him the Anoka, it will not go to his Yarshin. That's what he darshans. So the Gemara asks in this, but Yershav, Amailoi, why shouldn't the Yershim get this Anoka? Sachir, Kari Rachman, when it comes to an Eved, the Torah refers to him as a hired worker. So if so, Ma Sachir, Pulasa Yershav, just like any hired worker, if he's owed money for his work and he didn't get paid, so the Yershim get paid for this. Afhai Pulasa Yershav. Here you should say the same thing regarding Hanoka, that this is a form of payment, and if he doesn't get it, it should go to the Yershim. So Ella, the Gemara says, Loi v'loi lebal chayvai. That rather, the drasha that this mandama says, Rabbi Eliezer says this, you learn out that Loi is v'loi lebal chayvai, that he gets the money of Hanoka, and you don't give it to the Bal Chayv. What does that mean, you don't give it to the Bal Chayv? So the Gemara explains. Usually we follow the opinion of Rab Nosson. What did Rab Nosson say? The Tanya Omer Rab Nosson. Rab Nosson said the following: Minayin l'noishe b'chaveirei moneh v'chaveirei b'chaveirei. So if Reuven is collecting a loan from Shimon, and the Shimon is collecting a loan from Levi, so instead of Reuven getting his payment from Shimon, so Levi owes Shimon money. So Reuven can go directly to Levi and collect his money from Levi. That's the halacha that Rab Nosson says. So how do you know Shemitziyim Mizeh? You go from the last one that owes the money, V'noisten Lezeh, and you give it to the first one that the money is owed to, and you can skip out the ones in between. Talmud Loima V'nosan La'asher Osham Loi. You give the money to the one that it ultimately goes to. Osham Loi means to the first one. That's the halacha that it usually says B'negeh to a Bal Chayv. So over here, when it comes to the halacha of Hanoka, maybe you could say the same thing, that if a master owes Hanoka to this Eved, and now the Eved owes money to someone else, so maybe instead of the master giving the Hanaka to the Eved, let him give it directly to that Bal Choiv that the Eved owes it to. So Asaloi Lafuke. That's why it says over here, Hanik Tanik Loi, that this halacha of Hanaka is excluded from this halacha of Rab Nosson. The Hanaka is given to the Eved and not to anyone else. The other opinion, from where does he know this halacha of Rab Nosson? The Alma Nami Loi Svirelek Lank Rab Nosson. He doesn't hold Bechlal of this whole halacha of Rab Nosson. So therefore he doesn't need any pasuk to exclude that the halacha of Rab Nosson doesn't apply over here. Here there's a very big discussion in the Rishayim and the Achrayim because it comes out, the Gemara here is saying that we don't hold of Rab Nosson, according to this opinion that says that we compare that we don't compare the Moicha Atzmei to Machru Bezdin. He doesn't hold of Rab Nosson, and in all of Shas, the Gemara always brings Rab Nosson. We always paskin like Rab Nosson. We paskin like the Tanakama here that says that we don't compare Moicha Atzmei to Machru Bezdin. That's the halacha, and it seems like the Gemara is saying he does not hold of Rab Nosson, but all over in Shas, the Gemara always brings Rab Nosson, and the halacha is like Rab Nosson. Taisus here barichas about there's a big arichas, there's a steer over here in this halacha. Another just interesting point to mention when we get to this Hanaka, we'll see more about Hanaka later in the Gemara, but you see over here that Rebbe brings this Indian in a Sikha. When we get to Hanaka, the Gemara is saying that Hanaka is like a schar pula, it's like a payment, right? It's schar and it goes to the Yershim. There's a svara to say, and there's Mekayis for it as well, that Hanaka is like an Indian of tzedakah. The payment he got already. He was bought by his master and he was paid for this. The Hanaka is gifts that the Torah says that you should give b'Torah's tzedakah. But from here, from this halacha that the Gemara says that it goes to the Yarshim, you see that it also has an Indian aspect of a schar pula, of a payment mamish, and therefore it goes to Yarshim. Okay, the next halacha the Gemara says, my time in the Tanakama, what's the reason for what the Tanakama says? The Oma, Meicha Atzmai, Ein Rabbi Meisel Shivcha Kananis. So Eved that sold himself, so his master can't give him to marry a Shivcha Kananis, which means not only he's not allowed, it's a Isra. He's not a Shivcha Kananis, so he's a Yid, he's not allowed to marry a Shivcha Kananis. So Miyat Rachmana Gab Machru Bezdin, because it's the Pasik, by Machru Bezdin, there's a Miyat there. Pasik says, Ima Doinov, Yiten Loi Isha, if the master will give this Eved an Isha, so over there in that Pasik, it's speaking about Machru Bezdin, and that's Loi, V'loi L'moich Atzmai. That's only for the Machru Bezdin, but not for the Moich Atzmai. The other opinion, he disagrees and says, Loi means Bal Korchai. Loi over here is saying that you can give this Shivcha Kananis to be married to the Eved Kanani, it's to the Eved Ivri, that is. Even Bal Korchai, even against his will. That's part of, if you're an Eved, you have to work by day and by night, and even he has to be married to the Shivcha Kananis. From the other opinion, from where does you know this halacha, that it's even against the will of the Eved? Mishne schar sacher nafke. You learned it from the pasuk where it says Mishne schar sacher, which means that he's hired and he works double time. As here the Gemara will bring a brayse, that's the source that his master gives him a shivcha kananis even against his will. Tanya, as the brayse says, Ki Mishne schar sacher avatcha. What does this mean? Sacher, a regular hired worker, ein oived ela bayayim. He works during the day. Eved Ivri, Ovid bein bayayim or bein balayla. And Eved Ivri works by day and by night. Does it mean literally that he's working, whether out in the field or whatever other work he does by day and by night, 24 hours? But it says the way you have to treat an Eved Ivri, that he has to be good with you, meaning imach b'maichel, imach b'mishteh, you have to get him to eat and to drink like a mensch, you can't make him work day and night. So Rabbi Yitzchak answers and explains, what does it mean that he works by night? The fact that he's married to a Shivcha Kananis, and he's living with her at night, and he has children then, and those children remain avodim for this master, that's the work that he does for his master at night. The other opinion, why doesn't he learn from here? Why doesn't he learn from Mishnah Schar Sachet? Why did he have to learn it from before, what it says, that his master gives him a Shivcha Kananis? If you would learn out from the pasuk Mishnah Schar Sacher, I would say that he has to work by day and by night, but only if he agrees. But against his will, maybe the master cannot give him a shivcha kananis. That's why you learn it out from loy. Adainav yitan loy, he gives it to him to marry the shivcha kananis even against his will. So this is the conclusion of explaining all the halachas here in this braise, that there's no reason to say that the machlokes between the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Eliezer regarding all of these halachas is whether you learn out the Gzeira Shava of Sacher or not. Everybody agrees you learn it out. But as the Gemara brought here, the psukim, each one of these halachas have psukim that are memayit the Moicha Atzmai. So the Gemara now asks again, so Elo man tane de lo yalef Sacher. So where is there a machlokes about this? Who does not hold of this Gzeira Shava of Sacher? Says the Gemara, Hi Tana, maybe it's the following Tana. Tanya, we learned in Abraise regarding Yovel. The Shavel Mishpachte V'Geime. The pasuk by Yovel says that the Eved goes free and he returns to his family. Amar Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, V'mea Kosim Medaber. What's this pasuk speaking about? Ibe Moicha Atzmai. If it's speaking about a person that sold himself, Harei Kvar Omer. There's another pasuk which already says that he goes back to his family. And Rashi here brings the pasuk says, and there that pasuk is in Parshas Bahar. It's speaking about a moicha atzmai that he only works until Yovel. So that the pasuk already clearly says. If it's speaking about the Eved that was a nirtza, they pierced his ear and he stays till Yovel. There's another pasuk for that as well, which the Gemara is soon going to bring. So what is this pasuk talking about when it says v'shaval mishpachtai? This pasuk is coming to say even an Eved that the Bezdin sold. He was sold 2 or 3 years before Yovel. So Eved usually works for 6 years. So over here, this pasuk is saying that he's going to go out early at Yovel. That's what this pasuk is talking about. That's the brisa. Now says the Gemara, if you're going to say that this is Gzeira Shava, which means we compare Moicha Atzmai to Machru Bezdin. So Lamali, why do we need another pasuk to say that the Eved that the Bezdin sold goes free at Yovel? Neilev Sacher. We have the Gzeira Shava. If by a Moicha Atzmai it says he goes free by Yovel, so the same is by Machru Bezdin. So this is the Man Omar that holds that you don't compare. There's no Gzeira Shava Sacher. You don't compare the Moicha Atzmai to the Machru Bezdin. Rav Nachman by Yitzchak. So Rav Nachman Yitzchak asks him this and says, not necessarily is there a raya here. Lo ilam yalef Sacher. Could be he does learn out this Gzeira Shava. But nevertheless, you still need a pasuk to teach that this Machru Bezdin goes out at Yovel. Because I would think to say, Moicha Atzmai hu de lo yavad isura. What's a Moicha Atzmai? A Moicha Atzmai is a person that's poor and he sells himself for money. Doesn't have any money. But he didn't do any Isser before he got sold. Ava Machru Bezdin, when does a Bezdin sell a Evet to be a Evet Divri? That's if he stole and he didn't have what to pay for his Geneva. So then Bezdin will sell him. So he did an Isser. Maybe there's a knas that he does not go out by Yovel. If he was sold 2-3 years before Yovel, he has to stay and work all those 6 years. Kamash Malon, therefore you need a separate pasuk to say that he goes out at Yovel. So there's no raya from this man Omar that he doesn't hold of Sacher. Okay, the Gemara now, before it gets to try to bring another Tana that doesn't hold of this Gzeira Shava, will explain this Braisa here. Amama, the Braisa said, Ibn Nirtza, if that pasuk we brought before. V'shaval mishpachte. Is that pasuk talking about a nirtza? The Braisa said it can't be because Harei Kvar Omer. Because there's another pasuk where it says that an Eved nirtza goes free at Yovel. Maihi. What's that other pasuk? The Tanya. So we learned in the Braisa says V'shavtem ish al achuzasai, that every man returns to his achuzah, going back to his land, to his family, and v'shal mishpachte, to the family. So what is this pasuk talking about? This is another pasuk that speaks about Eved leaving in Yovel. If it's a Moicha Atzmai, we brought the pasuk before. It says that Shnas Yovel Yavid Imach. Even Machru Bezdin Harei Kvar Omer. Machru Bezdin. We also had the pasuk that we brought before. V'shaval Mishpachtei. Hayena Kosav Medaber Elo Benirtza. Shtayim v'Sholoshan Lufnei Yovel. This pasuk is talking about the one that was Nirtza. His ear was pierced 2-3 years before Yovel. Shahayovel Maitziyoi. That he will leave at the time of Yovel. My mashma. How do you know that this pasuk? Where do you see any mashmos in this pasuk that it's talking about a nirtza? Amarave barshile omakra, because the expression in the pasuk here is ish. It says v'shaftem ishal achazosay v'ishal mishpachtay. Ezeu davar shenoyeg beish ve'ein noyeg beisha. What do you have by a eved that's only by a ish and not by the isha? Avayim is uritzia. This is the halacha of the ritzia, as we brought before. Ome ivriya, there's no Indian of ritzia. Okay. Now the Gemara will explain, why do we need all these different psukim to say that an Eved goes out by Yovel? Why can't you just misvara compare them one to another? It says the Gemara, ve'itzterich lemichtav machru bezdin. It has to say separately that a machru bezdin doesn't go out in Yovel. that does go out in Yovel, and v'yitzrich l'michtav nirtza. And I asked to say regarding the nirtza that he goes out in Yovel. Before, the Gemara explained regarding the moicha atzmai, that a moicha atzmai, he didn't do an isser, machru bezdin did do an isser, but here the Gemara is explaining regarding the machru bezdin versus the nirtza. The ashmina machru bezdin, if would say that a machru bezdin goes out by Yovel, mishum deloi mati zimne. Because over here, we're talking about a machru bezdin. His time to go free did not arrive yet, meaning he did not choose to be an eved. The fact that a yid requests and chooses to be an eved is also a certain isser. Rashi here brings, the pasuk says that the Eibusha says avoday heim, v'lo avodim la'avod. A person is not supposed to go and acquire an odin for himself. So the machru bezdin that did not do that isser to request to be an eved himself, so he can go free. Aval nirtza, the matoi zimnei, the nirtza is a person that his time to go free came, and he requested to be an eved. So he's being over on this that the pasuk says ki avadayhem. Amen niknasei. So there's maybe I should be a knas that he should not go out free at Yovel. On the other hand, v'yashmina nirtza, if we just say that the eved nirtza goes free at Yovel, I would say mishum the aved l'sheish. Once he already worked 6 years before, so therefore the master already got some work out of him. He got 6 years out of him, so he doesn't lose so much. So he goes out by Yovel. But the machru bezdin that didn't even work 6 years yet, so his master is going to lose. Maybe he should not go out free. So therefore the pasuk has to say that he also goes out at Yovel. One more detail the Gemara brings up, even though it's not mamish something that the Braisa spoke about before, the Gemara brings up when you get to the psukim that it says when the eved goes out free by Yovel, v'yitzrech l'michtav v'shaftem. The pasuk has to say that we quoted before v'shaftem mishalach chazasai that the eved goes out free, and also v'yitzrech l'michtav lo'ilam. And then there's the other pasuk where it says that he works forever, that v'avodai lo'ilam, which means by the eved nirtza, that after you pierced his ear, he works for his master forever. So these two psukim, the v'shaftem and the lo'ilam, they're mashlim one another, b'nigeh to this eved nirtza. If the Torah would say by the eved, once you pierce his ear, that he works forever, so I would say that lo'ilam means literally, he stays an eved forever. So therefore, Rachmana v'shaftem, that's the pasuk of v'shaftem that says that he goes out free by Yovel. On the other hand, Vikas Rachmana v'shaftem, if the Torah would write just v'shaftem regarding the eved nirtza, so then avamine, then I would say as follows: Hanemili heiched yavat sheish. That when does the eved nirtza continue working for his master after the ritziyah, when he did not yet work for 6 years? Aval heiched yavat sheish, but even the eved nirtza, once he worked for 6 years after the ritziyah, lo yehei soifai chamor mitchilasai. After the ritziyah, he should not have to work any longer. It shouldn't be more stringent than the amount of years he has to work before the ritziyah. So matchilasai sheish, just like when he sold in the beginning to be an eved, so how long does he work for 6 years? After the ritziyah, maybe it just adds another 6 years, and that's it. That's where the Torah says that after the ritziyah he works lo'ilam. What does lo'ilam mean? Lo'ilamai shel yovel. That he works lo'ilam until yovel, that's considered to be forever. And that's the lashon of lo'ilam that says it's not just 6 years. Okay, now the Gemara comes back to the main point it was discussing. Is there a man the Omar that does not hold of this gzeir shava of sacher sacher? Ella, says the Gemara, man tane de leyalev sacher sacher. So who is the tane that does not hold of this gzeir shava of sacher sacher? Says the Gemara, Rebbe. It's Rebbe. The Tanya, as we look in the Braisa, so we go to Tezvav Amid Beis, the Braisa says, V'im lo yigal be'ela. The pasuk says, if you will not be redeemed with these. Now, what does be'ela mean? So this pasuk, as Rashi brings, is talking about an eved ivri that sold to a guy. And there, before in the pasuk, it says that this eved that sold to a guy, he could redeem himself, his relatives could redeem him. And unlike Eved Ivri that's sold to a Yid, you don't have this halacha that his relatives could come and pay and redeem him. But by a guy, a relative could come and redeem him. And then the pasuk says, "Im lo yigal be'ela." So then, when does he leave? The pasuk continues there and says, "V'yatza b'shnasa yovel." He's going to leave in yovel. So Rebbe said about this pasuk, "Be'ela hu nigal." What this pasuk is saying is regarding this Eved sold to a guy that he could only be redeemed be'ela, which is if a relative comes and redeems him. But he cannot be redeemed. He doesn't go free after 6 years. Not like the Evet that's sold to a Yid. Evet sold to a Yid goes out after 6 years, but an Evet sold to a guy does not go out after 6 years. She Yochel, now the Bryce explains why I need a pasuk, because otherwise I would think, V'haloi dinu, I can make the following Kal V'chaymer. If when it comes to an Evet sold to a Yid, and does not get freed by a relative, Nigal b'sheish, but he goes free after 6 years, Zeh shenigal be'ele. The Evet sold to a guy that goes out from a relative, by a relative redeeming him. Ein adin shenigal b'sheish. So the halacha of him being freed at 6 years for sure should apply. So Tamad Loimar, therefore the pasuk here is saying be'ela. The word ela is a miut, which means be'ela oniga, with what's mentioned over here in the pasuk. This is what he goes out free. And right before this, the pasuk there talks about the fact that a relative could free him, but ve'en nigal b'sheish. And he does not go out after 6 years. This halacha of sheish does not apply when he sold to a guy. That's the halacha that Rebbe says in the Brayse.
So it's forever, huh?
So he's going to have to work for his master until Yovel, actually, as the pasuk says, till Yovel. So now, if you're going to say that we have this Gzeir Shaveh, that we learn out Sacher Sacher, so here Rashi adds, till now the Gemara said Sacher Sacher is the Gzeir Shaveh between Moicher Atzmai and Machru Bezdin. But Rashi brings that this Gzeir Shaveh applies also to Eved that's sold to a guy. And Rashi brings the pasuk. It says over there by a guy the Lashon Sacher as well. Kischir Shana B'Shana Yiyeh Imai. So if there's the Gzeir Shaveh of Sacher Sacher, it goes in that as well. If so, Amai Ka'omar, why does Rebbe say Uma Misha Ein Nigel Be'ela? That the Evet that's sold to a Yid cannot be redeemed by a relative. Why not? Neilef Sacher Sacher. If the Torah says that a relative could redeem a Yid that's sold to a guy, the same should apply to an Evet Ivri that's sold to another Yid with this Gzeir Shaveh of Sacher Sacher. So the fact that he holds that by an Evet Ivri sold to a Yid there's no relative that can redeem him means that he doesn't hold the Gzeir Shaveh, Sacher Sacher. Amar Rav Nachman by Yitzchak, so Rav Nachman by Yitzchak answers, Lo Oilam Yalav Sacher Sacher. No, the emissaries, Rebbe does hold of the drasha of the Gzeir Shaveh Sacher Sacher, but Vishani Hacha, over here it's different, Amakra Yigalenu. In the pasuk before where it says, like Doida Ben Doida Yigalenu, that an uncle or a cousin comes and redeems him, so it says Yigalenu, that it redeems him. This Evet sold to a guy. And that means only here sold to a guy and not someone else, not the Evet that sold to a Yid. Okay, now the Gemara tried various different options to prove that there's a man Omar that does not hold of this Gzeir Shaveh Sacher Sacher. This was the last attempt of the Gemara, as far as I remember here, and then the Gemara doesn't prove it. The Gemara here says even Rabbi could be holds of this Gzeir Shaveh. So the Gemara never ended up proving this. Now the Gemara just moves on here to explain regarding this halacha that it just brought up over here. So the Gemara now man tana de palagale de Rabbi. Who disagrees with what Rabbi just said? Rabbi just said over here the halacha that when it comes to the Eved that's sold to a guy, he doesn't go out after 6 years. Why? Because of this drasha. Be'ela. Be'ela means only by a relative that redeems him and not after 6 years. But who argues in this? Rav Yosi Aglili and Rabbi Akiva. They both argue. And the reason they argue is because the Gemara is going to bring a Braise that they learn from Be'ela a different drasha. So they can't learn from Be'ela to exclude this halacha of leaving after 6 years. What does it say in the Braise? The Tanya, lo yigol be'ela, when it says in the pasuk over here regarding this Evet sold to a guy, if he will not be redeemed by a relative. So Rabbi Yosef Glili says as follows: Be'ela, over here when it says in the pasuk Eila l'shichrur, when a relative redeems an Evet Ivri that's sold to a guy, what happens? This Evet Ivri now goes free. Bishar kol adam, however, anyone else that's not a relative that redeems and pays to redeem this Evet from the guy, l'shibud. What happens is, this Evet Ivri doesn't go free. This Evet Ivri now is going to have to work for him. He's not paying and redeeming him that he should go free. He's paying for him, sort of buying him off, that he should work for him. That's how Rabbi Yosef Glili dashes from the pasuk. That be'evim lo yigal be'ele. So then what happens? What's the continuation of the pasuk? That v'yatza b'shnas hayovel, meaning if a relative doesn't redeem, another yid redeems you, so then you have to work for this yid until yovel. That's how Rabbi Yosef Glili dashes this pasuk. What do you mean? He doesn't have to work for a guy. It's much easier, much better to work for another yid than to work for a guy. Yeah. Rabbi Akiva, however, Rabbi Akiva says, no, it's actually the other way around. Be'ele l'shibud. When a guy is, again, when a relative is going to redeem you from the guy, so then you're going to have to go and work for that relative as an Evet. B'shar kolodam. When someone else that's not a relative comes and redeems you, then l'shichra. Then you're going to go completely free. So okay, the point is, both Rabbi Yossi Glili and Rabbi Akiva learn from Be'ela something else. So there's no exclusion over here from the halacha of sheish. The halacha that the Eved leaves after 6 years applies as well. But here the Gemara is going to explain the machlokes of Rabbi Yossi Glili and Rabbi Akiva. My time Rabbi Yossi Glili. So what's the explanation of Rabbi Yossi Glili's understanding of the pasuk here? So he says it's clear in the pasuk. Al makra, the pasuk says, "Im lo yugal be'ela." If he'll not be redeemed with these, which refers to a relative redeeming him, as it said before in the pasuk, elo ba'acher, rather someone else, it's not a relative, is going to redeem him. What does it say in the continuation of the pasuk? That v'yatsa b'shnasa yovel. When does this Eved go out free? Only at yovel, meaning he has to go and work for that person that redeemed him. Rabbi Akiva says you have to read the pasuk differently. Im lo yigal. If he's not going to be redeemed, then you have to add in something here. Elo be'ela. If he's not going to be redeemed only through a relative, then v'yatsa b'shnasa yovel. Then because the relative redeemed him, he becomes an eved now to this relative, and he works until yovel. That's Rabbi Akiva's pshat in this pasuk. So the Gemara right away asks that how could you say that this is the explanation for their machlokes? Rabbi Yossi Glili will ask Rabbi Akiva on this. Midi elo be'ela ksiv. Does it say that word elo in the pasuk? How is Rabbi Akiva darshaning and to say this way that you say elo that only when the relative redeems, then you have to work until yovel. Elo. So therefore, the Gemara tries another hesber based on other psukim. And here, this is actually the psukim where it says that a relative could redeem. And there in that pasuk, the Gemara will show that it actually says a few options of who could redeem this eved sold to a guy. They're arguing in the pasuk there where it talks about how he gets redeemed. So first the pasuk says, an uncle or a son of the uncle, the cousin, could redeem this eved. So golas krayvim. This is the first part of the pasuk. That means that a relative redeems. Then the pasuk continues and says, or he has money himself and he could redeem himself. Zugolas atzmai. This is the fact that he could redeem himself. And then the pasuk concludes after that, another word, it says v'nigal, and he gets redeemed. What's this extra word v'nigal? Zu gu'ulas acherim. This is saying that someone else, not himself, not a relative, anybody, any yid could come and redeem him from this guy. Okay, so you have the three things, that's the order of the pasuk. First gu'ulas krayvim, then gu'ulas atzmai, and then the gu'ulas acherim. So now Rabbi Yossi Glili holds as follows. Mikra nidra shlofonov. When it says, in the middle thing that it says in the pasuk is that he's redeeming himself. Now, the point here is, when a person redeems himself, obviously, he's going out completely free. There's nobody that he's working for. He's paying for himself. He's redeeming himself. So now, Rabbi Yossi Glili says, with the middle of the pasuk, we connect to the first point in the pasuk. And therefore, shadi gu'olas kroivim agolas atzmai. The halacha of relatives that redeem this eved will be the same as when he redeems himself. Those two parts of the pasuk are connected. Ma gulas atzmai l'shichra, just like when he redeems himself, so he's obviously going free. Av gulas kroivim, so too the pasuk here is saying that when relatives redeem him, l'shichra, they're redeeming him to be free completely. That's how Rabbi Yossi Glili darshans. On the other hand, Rabbi Akiva's opinion is mikra nidrash la'achrov. That the pasuk, the way you connect the two parts of the pasuk is not the middle part of the pasuk is connected to the beginning, but the middle part of the pasuk where it says that he redeems himself is connected to the end of the pasuk where it says v'nigal, that others that are not relatives redeem him. And therefore I say as follows: Shadi gulas acherim agulas atzmai. I compare when others redeem him to when he redeems himself. Ma gulas atzmai l'shichra, just like when he redeems himself, he's going completely free. Av gulas acherim l'shichra. So too only when others redeem him, not a relative, then he goes free. So over here, there's a machlokes in the lashon of this pasuk, whether you compare gulas acherim to gulas atzmai or gulas krevim to gulas atzmai. So now the Gemara says, okay, if this is the source of the explanation of their machlokes, so ihachi be'ele lamali. So the pasuk of be'ele, which was brought in the Braisa started off lo yugal be'ele, and they're both Rabbi Yossi Glili and Rabbi Akiva darshan from that word be'ele, that it's coming to exclude something. What is the drasha from Be'ela that the Braisa was saying if they're learning it out of here from this pasuk that you just brought here? So the Gemara answers, Ilav be'ela, you need that pasuk of be'ela and the machlokes of Rabbi Yossi Glili and Rabbi Akiva, how you darshan that be'ela, because if not for that pasuk, Hava Minna, then I would say over here in this pasuk that we just quoted, when it puts all three things in the pasuk together, the gulas kroivim, gulas atzmai, and gulas acherim, I would say mikra nidrash bein lufanav bein lachrov. That I darshan, since in the middle of the pasuk it talks about him redeeming himself, that goes on what it says before when relatives redeem, and it also goes on what it says after when others redeem. And I would say that in all cases when he's redeemed, he goes completely free. Right, so in this pasuk itself, there would be no room for a machlokes between Rabbi Yossi Glili and Rabbi Akiva. So basically, what the Gemara is saying now is, what's really the source of the machlokes how to darshan this pasuk? It's based on how you darshan vim lo yigal be'ela. So says the Gemara, if that's the case, so then if so, the question that we asked before regarding the drasha of be'ela comes back. What was the Gemara's question before? That before it said that Rabbi Akiva darshans the be'ela by adding in a word of elo. That in lo yigal elo be'ele, which means by relatives, then you go out free. And the Gemara asked, how could Rabbi Akiva darshan that way? Why does he add that word into the pasuk? So even now you're saying that the whole thing is still based on how you learn that pasuk of be'ele. Elo, says the Gemara, you're right. So let's go back to the drasha. All must be based on how you learn the be'ele, but you don't have to add in a elo there. Bisvara kamiflagi. They're arguing misvara what this be'ela goes on without adding in a elo. So the way Rashi explains this, we'll see soon. The Gemara over here is going to say what the svara is, but really, as we just saw, this pasuk of Oy Doidai Ben Doidai speaks about the three different tefanim of how a person can be redeemed, either through krayvim or through himself or through acherim. Now it's obvious that when he redeems himself, he goes free. So that's out. We're not discussing that. But then, after it says, this pasuk, that either his relative could redeem him, or he could redeem himself, which is in Kapitel Chafhei, pasuk Memtes, comes this pasuk here, Vim lo yigal be'ela. So the be'ela, which follows after that pasuk, what is the be'ela going on? Is the be'ela saying, in the case where a relative would have redeemed him, or is the be'ela going on when someone else, not a relative, would have redeemed him? So here they're arguing misvara what that be'ela, which is connecting to a previous pasuk, is going on. Rabbi Yossi Glili Savar, Rabbi Yossi Glili holds mistavre. It's logical to say gulas acherim that when someone else that's not a relative redeems him l'shibud, that what happens is he should have to work for that person and he shouldn't go free. Why? Because the Yomrit l'shichror, if you're going to say that when he gets redeemed that he goes free, havim is havu, so then mimni v'loy parkile. So then any other person that's not a relative does not have that feeling for him, he's not going to want to redeem him. But why should I pay for this person? And then I'm not going to have any benefit from this. He's going to go free. So it's mistaver to say, when it says in the pasuk, Vim lo yigal be'ela, that if he's not going to get redeemed by a relative, elamai, who's going to redeem him? Another person, a person comes redeem him, so then he goes, he's an eved, and he has to work until Yovel. That's what makes sense. Rabbi Akiva says, no, the svara actually goes the exact opposite. Mistavre, it's logical to say, gulas kroivim l'shibot, that when it's a relative that redeems, that this eved should have to continue working now for this relative. Why? Because the Yomrit l'shichror, if you're going to say that the relative has to redeem him and he goes free, so then this person, what he could do is, kol yayme v'yayme, ozlo maz benafshei. He can go and make money, sell himself to an eved, and he gets paid for this, and he knows that his relatives will feel very bad about this, and they're going to go and redeem him, and he's going to be free. So in order for this person not to take advantage of such a thing, so dafke by relatives that are redeeming him, it's mistaver to say that he should have to continue working for those relatives. Rabbi Yossi Glili and Rabbi Akiva are arguing in what case this eved that's free from the guy goes free or not. Chachamim disagree, and they say whoever redeems him from the guy, either way he always goes free. Who's the opinion of Chachamim? Rabbi. This is Rabbi, which was quoted before, because Rabbi, as the Gemara says, the maptiklei lahai be'ela l'drasha achrina. This pasuk of be'ela he learns out for a different drasha. What does he learn out from the drasha? The Gemara before said he learns out from be'ela that he only gets redeemed by relatives or by someone else, and not from sheish, not with after 6 years. So because you use it for a different drasha, so according to Rebbe, whoever redeems him, he goes free. And from where does he know this? Because mikra nidrash bein lefanav ubein la'achrav. The pasuk that we brought before, where it talks about in the beginning of the pasuk, oy doidei ben doidei yigalenu, And in the end of the pasuk, it says v'niga, which is the gula of achedim, and then in the middle of the pasuk, it says that he redeems himself. Because the Torah put in the middle of the pasuk that he redeems himself and he goes free, so we say that he always goes free. No matter who redeems him, we learn out that he goes free. So let's just finish off this Indian here to the two dots. Now, Rebbe, according to Rebbe, Hai v'yotza b'shnas hayovel ma'yavedle. What does Rebbe learn out from the continuation of the pasuk here when it says that this Eved goes out b'shnas hayovel? If according to Rebbe, no matter who redeems him, he always goes out free, so then what's the pasuk here saying that he only goes out b'shnas hayovel? Says the Gemara mibayla lekidetanya. He learns out from this what it says in the Braise, and according to the Braise, it's saying here halacha regarding this Eved that's sold to a guy that he works until Yovel when nobody redeemed him. And what's the Chiddush here? So like the Tanya, the Braisa says, when he goes out only at Yovel, what is this talking about? This is talking about a guy that you have control over him, and therefore when Yovel will come, you can come and tell this guy, the Eved's going free, and the guy will listen to you. So basically what the Pasuk over here is teaching you is, don't think that this Eved Ivri, which is working for a guy, and the guy paid for him, to buy him, and nobody's going to pay to redeem him. Don't think that the Eved could just run away from him and the guy doesn't have rights that he owns him. If the guy paid for him, the Yid, if no one's redeeming him, is going to have to work until Yovel. And don't think you could just run away from the guy. Now the Gemara clarifies, maybe over here, the fact that this Eved has to continue working for the guy all the way till Yovel, that's only regarding a guy that you don't have control over him. But otherwise, if it's a guy that you have control over him, maybe this Eved Ivri is allowed to run away from him even before. But that can be Amrit, so you'll say practically it doesn't make sense. If it's a guy that you have no control over him, the Pasuk wouldn't say that he has to work with him until Yovel. Because even by Yovel, the guy doesn't care what you say about Yovel. So this is talking about a guy that you have control over him, and what it's saying is that if no one is redeeming him, that he works for the guy until Yovel. So there's an interesting thing the Farshim point out over here. Usually by a guy there's a halacha that Gezel Akum is mutter. So you might think that a guy's paid for you and you're owned by the guy, but maybe you can run away from him. The worst, it's Gezel Akum. So over here the pasuk is saying no, that you're not allowed to run away from him, you have to work until Yovel.